Doug? How do I mute
So
this?
Zizzy and Carol and gentlemen, thank you for coming this evening. As people are making their way up the stairs, we are live now. We are live streaming this broadcast. I would like to welcome everyone all over the world. My good friend Ken up north in the Great White North that this snow flurry is going on, and all the rest. I am thankful and grateful that you're joining us through our live stream. So welcome to the Church of Perpetual Life. My name is Neil Vandry, and I will be your officiator this evening. And here at the Church of Perpetual Life, we refer to ourselves as immortalists, not because we have defeated death, but because we believe that future technology will conquer disease and aging, as well as death itself. While we fully understand that this technology does not appear to be currently available, the impressive history of human problem solving and technological advancement gives us all faith in its inevitability. Here at Perpetual Life, our mission is to assist all people in radical life extension, and we provide fellowship for longevity enthusiasts. At our regular meetings here, we have guest speakers, and we teach scientific rationality along with the Creator's plan that humanity evolve to achieve markedly extended, healthy lifespans. We follow Nikolai Fedorov's philosophy of the common task for humanity. Fedorov states that man is an active creature that will always act. If man does not know what to do, he will do what he should not do. Man will cease doing what he should not do only when he knows what to do. Man will give his energies to a cause when he regards it as his duty. Mankind will stop fighting when enough of society acknowledges that this is possible and therefore obligatory. To redirect energies now squandered on wars and relentless bickering toward the acts of universal salvation. And this duty, this is the common task, is a universally accepted project to regulate the forces of nature in order to defeat disease, famine, and death, ultimately. Fedorov's views were based on his faith in science and human reason. The Church of Perpetual Life is a science-based church. Our faith, again, is in the humanity's way of finding ways toward unlimited, healthy lifespans. So we wish to accelerate the Creator's plan of the common task of humanity to cultivate technology that will facilitate the transformation of life into an environment of indefinite existence. And in my opinion, to bring heaven here on earth. We have regular meetings here. Typically, we are on the fourth Thursday of the month. From time to time, that changes. This is our fourth Thursday in January, and our next presentation will be the fourth Thursday in February. And at that meeting, we will have Maria Entregues Abramson, and Maria is the outreach coordinator for the SENS, which is Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence Research Foundation, as well as an Argentinian-American actress, singer, and composer. She'll join us next month, and our services begin the same at 7 o'clock with the doors opening at 6 p.m. I'd like to invite you to peruse our library after the event tonight. You'll find our library in the outer sanctuary. You can check out a book. And Zizi, thank you for bringing End Aging back, Dr. Aubrey de Grey's book. That's now back available in circulation. And just fill out the card, and the instructions are on the table. So this evening, we have a wonderful speaker for you. Gentleman flew all the way down from the Great White North of Michigan. Joseph Kowalsky is the Chief Investment Officer at the Cryonics Institute in Detroit, Michigan. That's no relation to Dennis Kowalski. He was born and raised in the Detroit area in an Orthodox Jewish home. Both his parents are teachers, a fact that he feels encouraged his own lifelong love of learning. He recalls that he first became aware of cryonics when a 7th grade science teacher brought some cryonics material to class. And then Joe was hooked. And for the next 15 years, Joe kept abreast of the movement and eventually became an associate member of the Immortalist Society. He still remembers attending meetings at Dave and Connie Ettinger's house, speaking with Robert Ettinger himself. Joe went to Wayne State University and spent a semester at Columbia University and graduated magna cum laude with a BA in economics. He then went on to the University of Michigan Law School and graduated in 1991, subsequently moving to the Washington, D.C. area, where he became a member of the Maryland and Washington, D.C. Bar Associations. Joe spent several years working on various senatorial campaigns, a campaign for a presidential candidate, and finally on a presidential transition team. Afterward, he spent 2 months in Australia and New Zealand. I don't know if that was to recover from all that Washington work or if he was appointed there by an ambassadorial attainment. With the assistance and the encouragement of Congressman Broadhead, Joe formed his own law practice and set up the nonprofit corporation Tomorrow Incorporated. In 1999, he left the legal field to become a financial consultant, following an interest that he had had since his age 15, since he was a young man. And while assisting the Cryonics Institute in legal work related to a suspension when Joe was practicing a law and a practicing attorney, he decided to finally get his paperwork in order, to quote Robert Ettinger. So let's give a warm welcome to Cryonics Institute's CIO, Mr. Joseph Kowalsky, JD AIF.
Thank you, Neil Vandery. Yes, I am a recovering lawyer. Thank you, Neil Vandery. Thank you to all of you for welcoming me into your homes and into your hearts and into your family. In June, I spoke at the To Be Ahead Futurist Conference in Wolfsburg, Germany. The talk prior to mine was by Dr. Jose Cordero of Singularity University. Dr. Cordero began by reminding us of the amazing computers that we had in the 1970s. He talked about punch cards that could hold 1,000 bytes of information, 1K. And then we stepped up to floppy disks. They also held 1K, but now you could erase them and rewrite them and put new stuff on them. So 30 years ago, as he said in German, we had 1K and another K, which added together is Kaka. 30 years from now, he went on to say, the multi-gigabyte flash drives that we have will also be considered Kaka. In the 1970s, I was involved with Dr. Cordero's Kaka computers when we moved from mainframes and dumb terminals, similar to today's cloud, to PCs, for a few very good reasons. Speed. You don't need to reach across space to get information from a shared server. And security. You store your stuff on your computer. Got dark for a minute. Today, am I done? Oh. Today, speeds are so much faster for both computer processing and transmission that people think it has become insignificant. It hasn't. Especially as information stored and programs used become larger and more complex. I should not be faster than my computer, and that is happening more as more is stored in the cloud. And security remains a problem. We transmit so much over the internet that computer breaches have become common. But it is still nice to have my own information on my own machine with my own firewall, if for no other reason than that I may not be on a hacker's radar screen. Cloud proponents argue that they have far more money and reason to spend it to protect against hackers. True. But they are also fewer targets. And it presumes that the cloud minders don't steal our information for their own use or to sell to others. Of course, with artificial intelligence and human-computer integration, this could all change soon, but in the meantime, it's worth considering. And I bring this up, well, because I don't like the cloud. I think it has serious flaws and potential danger. And because, as we look to the future, we need also look to the past to ensure that we do not make the same mistakes. We do not repeat the same mistakes, which we had already made, and perhaps even found solutions to with more powerful technology. As you have heard, my name is Joseph Kowalsky. I'm on the board of directors of the Cryonics Institute. Cryonics is the freezing of human bodies to preserve them at the state that they were in when death occurred, until medical technology could revive them and bring them back to life or repair them. An ambulance to the future. It is amazing and wonderful to me that most of you already know this. What a change from not so long ago. And I don't mean just in this forum where you might expect that people have heard of cryonics. I'm talking about everywhere. The Cryonics Institute was founded in 1976 by Robert Ettinger, the father of cryonics, based on the idea that we are doing a public service, as well as working on our own behalves. It's a nonprofit corporation. The cost of whole body freezing, and no, we don't just freeze heads. The cost of whole body freezing is $28,000. Not very much more than an expensive funeral. And we want to be that ambulance to the future for as many people as possible. We often hear that cryonics is some kind of money-making scam. Well, if it is, we're doing it the wrong way. Because most of us are volunteers, and not only do we not make a penny off of it, but we also, a lot of us, put our own money into it as well as our time. And in fact, all of us now involved with the Cryonics Institute are volunteers, with the exception of one paid employee full-time and one part-time employee. However, we have a large endowment and we have no debt, and we can add to our employment roles if necessary. The difficulties of suspended animation via cryonics used to relate mostly to crystallization, which occurs when water freezes. If you've ever seen a magnified snowflake, anybody see a magnified snowflake? Its beauty comes from the myriad points that stick out from the flake. But these points are sharp. And as water freezes and these crystals occur, these sharp points often break the cell membranes. And that's a big problem. So, since the body is over 70% water, it's a huge problem. Many years ago, we started removing a lot of the blood from the body as much as possible and replacing it with a glycerol compound that acted as an antifreeze, and that helped quite a bit. Since then, there was, and I should add that at that time, before we started doing that, a lot of the scientists of the day would say that trying to revive a cryopreserved patient was like trying to revive hamburger, and that's why, because of that breakdown of the cells. Since then, we've done a lot of research into vitrification. Vitrification is the bypassing of the crystallization process of freezing entirely. And with this vitrification solution that we put into the bodies, you go from liquid to a solid glassy state. And you don't have to worry about those points breaking the cell membranes. So we maintain the integrity of most of the cells quite diligently. And that is no longer a very big problem at all in any of the body. There are still some problems. There is occasionally small cracking, micro cracking. It's not terribly significant, but it is a problem. We're working on that. And the vitrification solution itself, and this is the bigger problem, is toxic. So when we do revive a patient, and I will speak later about why I believe we'll be able to do that, when we do revive a patient, we have to remove the vitrification solution quickly to ensure that the body is not poisoned. Work continues on this, as well as on developing non-toxic vitrification solution. But at the same time, we are looking to future science to develop damage repair methods. I've been involved with cryonics in general since I was 13 years old. The typical paradigm, birth, school, marriage, move to Florida, die. I don't just speak in Florida, so you'll have to forgive me. It doesn't work for me. It never made sense to me. There's so much to do, to learn, to be, and so little time. When I first became involved, most did not know what cryonics was. And of those that did, most thought it was crazy. Today, most think it's a reasonable possibility, but not for them. Well, it's a step forward. I recently read a quote from Dr. Stephen Hawking. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. Humans are good at that. We are resilient and malleable. What is interesting, and what he did not mention, is that for millennia, since we invented tools and fire, we've been making some of the changes to which we've had to adapt. It's an interesting thought. We can't control everything, and I wouldn't want to, but we can and do control some things. A caveat to Dr. Hawking's statement is that an important part of creating a future as we want it to be is to make people see it as normal. My niece got married a few years ago, and I spoke with her and her new husband at the wedding and with the gathered people at the wedding. And I said to her new husband, one day you're going to walk in and my niece is going to be in the living room with an upside-down chair, sitting on this upside-down chair, reading a book. And you're going to look at her like she's crazy. And you're going to say, what are you doing? And my niece will say, oh, you must not realize it's Wednesday. Okay, it's Wednesday. Well, it's Wednesday. On Wednesday, you turn the chair upside down and you read a book. Everybody does that. It's normal. My family always did it that way. Everybody does it. And then I said to my niece, one day you're going to walk in, and your beloved will be sitting on the kitchen table, playing a banjo and eating scoops of butter. And you're going to look at him like he's crazy. And you're going to say, what are you doing? And he's going to say to you, oh, I have the hiccups. So? Well, this is a sure cure for hiccups. Everybody does this. This is normal. My family always did it this way. What we consider normal is based on what we've grown up with. Anybody who's married or who's lived with someone else for any length of time will know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, ask somebody next to you. They'll explain it. Or you can look at different cultures. You can see customs in different societies. What they think is absolutely normal, we might think is crazy. Now, I hope that we have a certain amount of respect for many different ways of life. But that doesn't mean that we're going to do it that way. And a lot of times, we will absolutely not want to do it that way, even though they think it's absolutely important or necessary. I got lost in my talk. So good. Many thought of those of us involved with cryonics as arrogant. Arrogant, delving into the territory of God. I see it as the opposite. We are modestly saying that we do not know when death occurs. It's 1890. You're walking down the street. Someone falls down on the street. Heart attack. There's a doctor there. Checks him out. He's dead, Jim. You run up. You say, wait, I have a defibrillator. And you start, shocking him, doing CPR, the whole thing. What happens? They arrest you for desecrating the body. What do they see? They see you shocking a dead body, making it jump, pounding on his chest, kissing this dead man. It's macabre. It's disgusting. Today we know that that person might not be dead yet. Any Monty Python fans here? Yeah. Cryonics says that today we are equally ignorant. Perhaps future technology will say to us, what, cancer? We can fix that. That's easy. Thank you for keeping this person in stasis until we had the opportunity. And we know it works. 20 years ago, an article in the New York Times talked about how we need to keep patients a few degrees warmer during surgery than was standard to ensure better results. They did note that lower temperature was a necessity for heart surgery, but they didn't quite put the pieces together. Today, 20 years later, low-temperature surgery is being pioneered in Pennsylvania and at Harvard Medical School as an amazing improvement over surgery at normal body temperatures. Here's a headline from the British newspaper, The Telegraph. Patients to be frozen into state of suspended animation for surgery. Patients are to be placed into a state of suspended animation when they undergo surgery by using a groundbreaking technique that freezes their bodies to the point of death. For surgery. A recent article in Scientific American described experiments with nematodes, little things, that showed that they could be frozen without loss of memory. We've seen people underwater in cold water for 40 minutes come out with no brain damage. And last year, a man was found in the snow in Pennsylvania. He was non-responsive. He was not breathing. His heart was not beating. The coroner was called. The coroner estimated he had been in -4 degrees Fahrenheit without a heartbeat, without his lungs working for about 12 hours. The paramedics were ready to take him away, have the coroner take him away. They called the doctor at the hospital, Lehigh Hospital, and the doctor said, do CPR. And, okay, they were surprised, but they did. Several weeks later, this man went home, minus his fingers and toes, but alive. 12 hours. The headline in the Washington Post read, "Being frozen to death saved this man's life. It could save others too." What a huge step forward in understanding and acceptance. You know, frequently when reality is in disagreement with what's in our head wins. It takes a lot for reality to overcome the inertia in our own minds. And here we see that it has, which is very nice. Now, this was a very short period of time, 12 hours, and the man's body did not get below 65 degrees Fahrenheit. But the wood frog and the woolly bear caterpillar freeze solid over the winter. Their heart, lungs, and brain stop entirely, and then they revive in the spring. Their heart, their lungs, their brain starts working again, all by itself. And most recently, the journal Cryobiology reported the successful revival of tardigrades, little creatures, also known as water bears. There they are, little guys, cute little guys. They were revived after being frozen for 30 years. 30 years. They lived and even reproduced. If nature does this, and it does, we think it likely that we will be successful as well. You can't fly a heavier than air object. That's crazy. Until you copy the birds, which have done it forever. Recently, I was asked to attend a cryonicist conference for those in their teens and 20s. This is a conference that's sponsored by Bill Falloon, and we're very grateful to him for sponsoring not only that, but innumerable conferences, research efforts, ventures in cryonics and other areas of life extension. So I was asked to attend this conference for teens and 20s, no longer as a teen, unfortunately, but as an elder statesman. Somewhat uncomfortable feeling. But it reminded me that Robert Ettinger, the father of cryonics, found himself in a similar situation. During World War II, he was injured, badly injured. He was in the hospital for 3 months. And during that time, he read a lot. And one of the things that he read about was cryonics. And he thought to himself, well, I'm a young man. By the time I need it, someone will have done this. He then went into his 30s. He grew into his 40s. Nothing's happening. And he came to what I think of as that oh crap moment. And he decided he's going to have to do this himself. So he did. It began. And we have developed into a strong organization. But until these ideas are commonplace, we will not have succeeded. I mentioned earlier that the Cryonics Institute was founded by Robert Ettinger. Robert Ettinger. Anyone who knew this visionary as I did, also knows that he was brilliant, kind, giving, and a curmudgeon. He was a pragmatic scientist. He didn't have any interest in or patience for glitz or glamour. His message appealed to us, but not to the bigger audience. Just like most people don't read a scientific journal. He had this comment he would say, and I don't know if it fits in here, but I really like it, so I'm going to say it anyway. He would say, "Often mistaken, never in doubt." And I really thought that was great. If he found that he was mistaken, he would correct himself and he would change, but it's a great way. He would always move forward. But to appeal to a larger audience, we regularly meet with the media around the world. There have been articles and news stories about cryonics and the Cryonics Institute in the media of several European, Asian, North American, South American countries, as well as in Australia. And CI has been featured in several documentary and other films. But what do we say? Is it something that people will hear? One thing we neither say nor believe is that we are trying to raise the dead. One of our members died in a shopping center parking lot some 18 years ago. Fortunately, they had a defibrillator at the store. He was revived, and he lived another 16 years. He lived another 16 years. Had this happened just a few years prior, the store would not have had a defibrillator, and the story would likely have had a different ending. Although I said that he died in the parking lot, we know today that he wasn't really dead. His body had a catastrophic failure, but it was not irreparable. We were able to reboot him. This is the message we try to get across. We are ignorant. We don't know when someone is truly dead, when someone's heart stops, when disease damages the body beyond what we can now repair, when illness overtakes our medical skills, and the person lies silently in a bed. He may be screaming to us in silence, "I'm not dead yet." I think, and now I speak for myself alone, I think it is an affront to God to pronounce and declare that without question that person has died. We have seen too much in the last 40 years of organ transplants, heart bypass surgery, defibrillators, to have the hubris to say that. And so we do what we can. But what about the rest of the world that doesn't see it that way? Has anyone here ever heard of the internet? Anyone? Raise your hands. A lot of you. Yeah, pretty much. Why? I think it's because the World Wide Web has a lot of stuff on it. Here's some examples of that stuff. Cartoons, college classes, financial information, conspiracy theories, news, pornography, family histories, TV shows, numismatic information. Okay, so who here in the past 5 years has looked at all of that on the internet? Anybody? Bill has, yeah. I'm not surprised. Very few. Why? Because we have different interests. I was an economics major. I find discussions about the elasticity of demand fascinating. How many people even know what that means? Language itself can feel threatening to people, even if the topic of discussion might interest them. They might want to discuss ways to restore a sick person to health, but would never want to discuss freezing a corpse. I often feel like saying to people who refuse to consider cryonics, "You stupid person. Why the heck will you take a pill from your doctor that might have the side effect of sterility or even death, without question, but you won't even consider cryonics?" Now, I'm not saying to anybody, just stop taking your meds. I'm just commenting on the blind acceptance of some things and the blind rejection of others. I was going to joke about the side effects, saying, your legs might fall off or your eyes might melt, and then my friend told me that, the real side effects are actually could be worse, so I used the real ones. But if I would talk to people that way, or worse still, if I would dismiss them without talking with them at all, what would I achieve? Nothing. Religious groups have learned over the years to talk to people about things that interest their audience and tie it in with what they want to discuss with them and what they think is important. The Jehovah's Witnesses offer a very good example. they found that people often don't want to talk about God. Hey, want to spend a few hours talking about God and what you need to do? Yeah, I don't think so. But people do want to discuss their relationships, fear of death, the world at large, crime. So, they offer well-written, easy-to-read articles on these topics and show how their religious beliefs fit in with that. Here's some titles. Attitudes Make a Difference, Making Peace at Home, A Visit to Liechtenstein, The Color-Changing Ability of the Cuttlefish. Scientists are trying to use this in our clothing. Now you have things that cover your topic, appeal to a variety of interests, and which people want to hear. And be positive. You know, terrorists use glycerin to make bombs. A homemaker to make jelly treats. In 1951, the new head of the Lubavitch Jewish sect, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in his first talk, 1951, when the knowledge of the Holocaust was just becoming widely known, a time when it would have been easy and understandable to talk about the jungle that we live in, the terribleness of the world, anger, hatred, negativity. He chose for his first talk a quote from the Song of Songs, and he spoke of the garden that we live in, my beloved. Not an easy thing, but what you need to do to be a true leader. He believed that our job is to make the world a better place, and so do we. So what do we learn? Use language that people understand and are comfortable with. Discuss things with people that they want to discuss. Be positive and talk with everyone. Now that said, it is easier to talk to people who have open minds. Who are some of those people? I heard a comment from someone running the Google Science Fair. She said, 14-year-olds are too young to know that things cannot be done, so they do them. It's important to talk and to make presentations in schools, or to invite them to you. High school science classes come into the CI facility with their teachers for a 2-hour seminar on cryonics. And we even make liquid nitrogen ice cream. But, and this is key, so I'm going to repeat it, talk with everybody. Truly successful people have generally gotten there by getting up every time they are knocked down and continuing to move forward. And believe me, successful people have gotten knocked down a lot in almost all cases. So get up, talk to everybody. Attitudes. Attitudes both follow and lead the future. Cryonics has become fairly accepted, for you, but not for me. So I was thinking to myself a couple years ago, what can we do that would be more acceptable to the public, yet also tangentially benefit cryonics and move it forward? Virtually everyone today supports organ transplants. Most know someone who has needed or donated an organ, but nearly 70% of some organs go to waste. These are donated organs. 70% of some donated organs go to waste due to the speed required for transplants. The medical community is working on 3 methods to deal with this. Growing organs from scratch, using nutrients being pumped into the organ during transport, and this is being done somewhat successfully with livers today, and the freezing of organs for organ transplant. Through a project unaffiliated with the Cryonics Institute, I am working to encourage research into the freezing of organs, with another goal of getting ordinary people involved.
Hi, I just donated $10 toward the Cryo Prize to help make organ transplants safer, less costly, and more available to those in need. My name is Sharita. Join me. Click on the link below to read more about the prize and to donate $10. And be sure to share this video with your friends and family.
Thank you, Sharita. Organ transplants have been done successfully for only a handful of decades, yet we practically take them for granted. But they are difficult, expensive, and time-sensitive. And though they've only been done successfully for a relatively short period of time, in many ways, the process is the same as it was when most people had rotary dial telephones. If a kidney is not transplanted within 36 hours, it dies. If a liver is not transplanted within 12 to 16 hours, it dies. Typically, lungs need to be transplanted in under 8 hours, and a heart within 6. That's a very short window of time. If a heart becomes available in Los Angeles at midnight, and the recipient is asleep in Nevada, imagine those 6 hours. The difficulty of quickly assembling the necessary team of experts. Transportation costs. Preparing the patient. The people involved in this process are amazing, and they do miraculous work. But if that window could be expanded, there would be more time to prepare the team and the patient. Transportation costs would be reduced dramatically. Safety could be enhanced, and more lives would be saved. One way to extend this time is to develop a reliable way to temporarily freeze an organ, as we now do with sperm, eggs, and embryos, and when ready, to revive the organ and implant it into the patient. The Organ Cryopreservation Prize, the Cryo Prize, was established to help make this happen. Initially planned to be $50,000, the prize will be given to the first person or group that successfully freezes and restores one of several mammalian organs to full function. Details are on the website below. The prize is administered by a federally recognized 501c3 nonprofit organization. Donations are tax deductible to the extent allowed by law. You can mail in a check, you can donate online. The bigger the prize, the more likely that this procedure will soon become a reality. With your help, the prize could grow far beyond our initial goal of $50,000. So share this with a friend
and
join us.
Join us.
Donate $10. For the cost of 2 large specialty cups of coffee,
You can be a part of this
adventure
and possibly change the world.
A few months ago, I met with a gentleman named Evan Breen. Among people in their teens and 20s, this young man is a well-known producer of 6-second videos, humorous videos, on a medium called Vine. When I met with him, he had over 500,000 followers. Today, he has over 1.1 million followers. He is 23 years old, and he did his own video about the Cryo Prize. This is not the most polished or scientific presentation, but it's being watched by 18 to 25-year-olds. How many of us thought about our own mortality at that age? I did. Phil did. But most people don't. Here's the video that he produced, and which was watched by over 1,500 people in the first 2 days.
Cryo Prize. Basically the freezing of organs, and I know that it sounds a little bit ridiculous. I'm sure that this is something that has affected either you, a family member, and if it hasn't, then most likely within your lifetime it will affect somebody close to you. It takes 6 hours for a human heart to become non-functionable outside of the human body. If a heart becomes available in Los Angeles, there's 6 hours to assemble a team and fly the heart to, say, Las Vegas, and that's not a whole lot of time. Like I said, at first I thought it was kind of odd. I've never really heard of it before, but it just makes too much sense. Why wouldn't there be a bank of frozen organs? We are trying to raise $50,000 as a prize to give to the first lab to freeze and return an organ to 100% full functionality. Its main purpose is to get the ball rolling. It's gone from almost science fiction to reality, and it's something that needs to happen. And this is technology that will be available at some point, whether it's tomorrow, next month, next year, 20 years from now. Why not donate to try and speed up the process of this research? This is something that takes time out of the equation. Whether it's you or a family member, today, tomorrow, next month, next year, getting in an accident, needing an organ transplant, this is something that is very real, and you don't really realize the need for a process like this until it's too late. And I think that this is something that needs to happen now and becomes the norm down the road. The link is in the bio. If you want to check it out, read about it, donate $1, anything helps to get this technology rolling. And I think that this is something that is very important. If you want to ask me any questions about it, feel free to email me. It's on my YouTube, my Twitter, all of my social media accounts. And I'm willing to answer questions because this is definitely something that I believe in and support.
There are other groups and other things being done on this front. I've read about the efforts of the Organ Preservation Alliance, which has a strong team of scientists, physicians, and entrepreneurs with training from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, etc., and the work that they're doing in this arena. The X Prize Foundation, which has given prizes that encouraged the development of such things as the first private reusable manned rocket to go into space and safely land back on Earth, is also considering offering a prize for the freezing and revival of organs for transplant. And last year, the United States Department of Defense allocated $60 million to research into freezing of organs for transplant. This year they added $11 million to that. I'm thrilled. For good and understandable reasons, organ transplants are something that people at large jump to support. Perhaps because, as I mentioned, virtually everyone knows someone who has received or needs an organ or is an organ donor. When I started the CryoPrize project, my friend Dina said to me, she's heard me talk about cryonics for 30 years and it never really made an impact on her. She never really thought it was that significant. But this CryoPrize, making organ transplants safer, less costly, more available, now that's important. This is a stepping stone, perhaps a necessary stepping stone to cryonics, and the public supports it. Yay! Let's look to the future for a minute. Longer life has already and likely will further affect relationships. What we think about working, for example. I want to be a blimp pilot, and I'd also like to be a chef. Physical changes might give me the fingers to be a better guitar player. Can't get any worse. We might easily change our gender or skin color. More interrelationships via brain connected to other brains could lead to an intuitive feel of others' subcultures, and I hope greater acceptance, as we have already seen to some extent via the media interconnections and communications advances. You know, like odors, dialect and language can have a great effect on us. Far more than race or skin color, I believe, or educational differences or anything else. The way that people speak can be endearing to those who grew up with similar spoken attributes and grating to those who did not. And this is largely subliminal, like a sound that can annoy us even if it's too high-pitched for us to realize that we're hearing it. Now, once we can share each other's memories and skip the whole language part, will this change? Will we have more understanding? I hope so. We will be able to use these techniques as today we drive a car or use a computer without necessarily understanding the underlying workings. So we will become more able to do things, but perhaps less knowledgeable individually. And the question remains, if we change ourselves so much, will it mean a change to our societal and moral norms? If I change my body to that of a bumblebee, how will I interact with others? We don't know. Cryonics, organ repair, organ replacement, transplant, these are a few ways that we are working towards repair of physical body structures and extending lifespan so that we can achieve more of our potential, whatever it may be. A physicist, a chemist, and an economist were stuck on an island, and they had cans of food, and they were starving. And they're trying to figure out how to get into these cans of food. So the physicist says, well, here's a rock. We'll hit the can will split open, we'll be able to eat the food. And the chemist says, wait, I have an easier method. We spent hours starting that fire over there. Let's just stick the can into the fire, and the pressure will cause the can to explode, and then we'll eat the food. And the economist laughs at them, and he says, you guys, you're making this so tough. Why don't we just presume that we have a can opener? Well, I was an economist. I have an undergraduate degree in economics. And economists create models to predict the future. One of the biggest things that economists have learned is that as complex as these models get, we almost always miss something. And in general, not just in economics, projection of the future has been notoriously difficult and frequently wrong. Maybe this will change with artificial intelligence, but not with most of my projections. We think it likely that changes we'll see in the next 100 years and to which cryonicists look forward are the repairing of damage to our bodies, changing the physical structure of our bodies, for example, as a means of colonizing a planet, and modifying our brain or interfacing with external sources. I don't want to go into any detail because I have no clue as to how this might actually happen. For example, will artificial intelligence want to interface with us? We don't know. Elon Musk is very concerned about the unintended potential dangers of artificial intelligence. Ray Kurzweil, not so much. But both agree that the changes will be dramatic and beyond what we can contemplate. Just as today's internet was not a glint in your grandparents' eyes, to mix metaphors. Rather than trying to make projections then, what I like to discuss is how we might do these things. Nanotechnology is way up there and already in use. Machines the size of molecules can be used to manipulate and reorganize our cells. Gene therapy and manipulation is what we might think of as a more organic, chemical, or biological method for doing similar things with nanomachines that we do not build from scratch, but which nature provides us. And finally, with the help of artificial intelligence, and that keeps popping up because it is going to be a biggie, we may yet learn of methods beyond what we can today fathom or guess. Two people were talking. One says, the internet's not a superhighway. And the other one says, yes, it is a superhighway, but it's nighttime, there are no streetlights, and the exit signs are unmarked. What I look forward to with artificial intelligence is a means not just of finding information, but organizing it, comparing it, testing it. There's a vast amount of information out there, much of it bogus. And potentially, with artificial intelligence, we could do all this, and all in our heads, so to speak. Changes in societal norms are already allowing us to move more quickly in this direction. We see nanotechnology in use. We see cloned animals. We see bloodless surgery, frozen sperm, eggs, and embryos, targeted drug therapy, organ transplants, dialysis, and as of very recently, the huge benefit of and advances in the science of low-temperature surgery. People are more apt today to raise ethical questions about the type of manipulation I'm mentioning, and that is very important to raise those ethical questions. But they're more likely to raise the ethical questions than they are to raise questions about what's possible. For example, there is a running dispute in the life extension community as to whether a copy of a person's memories, if identically copied, perhaps even a physical reproduction of the brain itself, if this is the same person or a twin with the same memories. I'm in the camp that says it's a copy. However, what about a transporter that we see in science fiction? The transporter converts the person's material physical parts into energy, transmits it somewhere, reconverts it into matter. Is that a copy or is that the same person? Scientists have actually recently accomplished this feat, albeit with very small particles. So this is no longer just a thought problem. This is reality. And again, as we physically change ourselves, and physically includes the brain, will our morals change? History indicates that roles of good, bad, and everything in between remains, no matter how much our technology our wealth, our habitat, our knowledge grows or changes. I was recently in Pompeii, and it amazed me that while our technology has changed, people really haven't. My wife commented that to this day, people don't treasure life. Killing is easy. Keeping people alive, much more difficult. I say to the terrorists, go out there, find a cure for cancer. You'll get whatever you're asking for, unless it's Armageddon. It's hard to do. Killing is much more easy. And will there be a wealthy and powerful class that controls and manipulates a lower class? Or will easy access to knowledge create more egalitarianism? One of the premises of the Cryonics Institute is that cryonics is coming, and we had better develop it before the bad guys do. Because there are people out there somewhere that are working on it that we don't know about, and they're trying to get it first. And that's also why we keep our prices low. We want to share this with a cross-section of society, not just out of altruism, but to ensure our own future in what we consider a healthy, diverse society. There are always a few visionaries, and eventually, their vision often comes to fruition. Sometimes, though, the visionary is tortured to death in an inquisition or dies a pauper like Nikola Tesla. Not so great. There have been changes in societal acceptance, but not enough. Cryonics has a tough time because of this. Here's an example of the circle. Ha! I love when that happens. Here's an example of a circle. Here's an example of the circle that we need to break into to make this happen. This is something that was discussed by Dr. Aubrey de Grey at a conference that I went to. Government won't grant funding to certain things. They'll only grant funding to certain types of research. And the people who do research, cryobiological societies, other scientists, they want funding. So they say, yeah, we're not going to do research into cryonics. That stuff doesn't work. We don't want any of that. We want nothing to do with that. We want your money. But what they say to the government is, we're going to do research into things that really matter, the things that you say matter. And they get the money. And so they say, yeah, cryonics won't work. And then they say that to the science pundits on TV, the talking heads on TV, and the talking heads on TV say it to the public. They hear it from the scientists. Oh, cryonics doesn't work. It's not going to work. We're not going to do research into that. And they tell the public, oh, this stuff doesn't work. We should stay away from it. And what does the public do? The public goes to their elected officials and they say, hey, when you're giving grants for research, make sure you don't do that cryonic stuff because we know it doesn't work. We heard it on TV. And so it's this big circle. And it's very difficult to break into. But if we can start with something that is acceptable to society, such as organ freezing for transplant, and which, by the way, is an extremely important thing to do in its own right, we get a free pass. The federal government happily gives $60 million, now $71 million, to that cause. We can save more lives with organ transplants. And as I say, it's important in its own right. And we can also hasten the development of cryonics and save more lives still. And maybe not go through some of that nasty torture or pauper stuff. It's a win-win-win. In the 1970s, it was predicted that we would soon have video phones and flying cars. Well, 50 years later, we have video phones. So much of what we predict never comes to pass. But what we do today, it happens. Those of us speaking at the Futurist Conference I mentioned, we're trying to make some predictions to help the business leaders of the audience plan for the future, and that's important. But since most people are followers, those of us who are here and others who try to do something will have more impact on what does occur than we might expect, especially if we can indeed lead others. Which is why I focus on what we need to do today to bring about what we want tomorrow, more than guessing what might be coming tomorrow. Cryonics is about doing things today to try to bring about tomorrow, whatever that is. Because if we are not here tomorrow, all of our predictions don't matter. But in promoting and developing cryonics, we do affect the future. As we lengthen life and repair people, cryonics will likely be used less. But there will probably be accidents, and it will probably be continue to be used for emergency situations. If we move to a virtual existence, well, who knows? We may abandon the need to preserve the body. I have a belief that there's more to us than neurons, but that's my own belief and bias. So, what can we do? Organ freezing for storage, transport, banking. Whole body freezing, cryonics. We know these things work in nature. It is up to us to copy that process for human beings. And now, as Brent Spiner said at a Star Trek convention I was at not long ago, enough about me. Ask me some questions. A microphone. My kingdom for a microphone. That's good, because I don't have a kingdom.
A little more, a little more volume there. And I think that's a little bit too much. So we have questions.
Does the Cryonics Institute have the largest number of patients right now?
That's actually a very good question. We have 136 patients and over 1,250 members around the world. Alcor has a similar number. I'm not sure of the exact number. I know that the two organizations are close, but I'm not sure which one actually has more patients. I'm just very grateful that we both have patients and that we're growing at such a nice rate, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. If you have any more knowledge about that, I'm happy to.
Well, no, I assume Cryonics Institute had more. So okay.
That's what we have, and we will have more. Ask me again next year.
And what Joe just said was not Al Gore, but Alcor.
Right.
And
Not the creator of the internet,
and,
the other guy.
And he's speaking
Alcor.
of the two. So there are two large cryonic organizations, and there are others as well.
There are. There's an organization in Oregon that started recently. There's Cryorus in Russia. There's an organization in Australia that's starting up that will begin freezing patients at some point. So we're hoping to have organizations in different places because, as I said, we can't control everything, and there are natural disasters, there are government issues, there are all sorts of things that could happen. The more different places that we have people stored, the better off we'll be.
And I have a Bob in the back of the room that has a question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, hi. What about the process from when you die to getting preserved? Are you working on any research in that area? In other words, you got to cool the body down, and
Yes.
you got to get the body to the place.
Yes, there are a number of different ways of doing that. Cryonics Institute has always been sort of an a la carte organization. It was the idea being that you take some responsibility for your own life and your own future life. So, for example, Bob Ettinger contracted with a funeral director and paid him $1,000 a year and trained him to be prepared for exactly what would happen at the end of his life. And he was, in fact, at the end, after he died, pronounced dead by hospice. They immediately put him into an ice bath and started cooling him down and started doing other things at that time. So he had prepared for that in advance. There's also Suspended Animation Incorporated, which is used in conjunction with the Cryonics Institute and Alcor, and I believe at Alcor it's standard. That suspended animation is on hand. They take certain of these responsibilities on themselves, and so they appear on the scene, and they're very well trained. They have an immense amount of equipment that they can use, and knowledge and skilled people to help to prepare people. And you have to talk with hospitals, hospice. It's very important to take responsibility, even if suspended animation is involved. You want to speak with these people in advance. Hospitals are very very willing to help out if you talk to them and you tell them what it is you want. Funeral homes are very willing to help out. They want to do what the person wants. It's not necessarily that they believe that this will work or that they agree with it, but most of these places want to do what the patient wants. We just have to tell them, and we have to help them out in advance to do that. And there is, to answer your other question, I think that was a two-part question. There is research that's going on into methods of both cooling, freezing, and what happens during freezing, what happens if we don't freeze people quickly. We've actually had a very interesting bit of research that was done not long ago where the result of not cooling immediately was much less damaging than we had expected. We thought it would be quite damaging, and it was less damaging than expected. So that was an exciting moment, because there are times where we can't get a body immediately. If a government entity has the body, if there's a question of, someone died in a bathtub once, so that I was involved with that case when I was still a practicing attorney, and they had to determine whether it was a homicide. And so we had to really work with them. And again, getting to know your government officials and working with them really helps in that regard. And being respectful of them, and being prepared, and knowing what to talk about. But yes, there's a lot of research that's going on, both in-house and also on a contractual basis with other organizations. We did have one of the top cryobiological researchers from the Soviet Union, Dr. Yuri Pachugin, who was on staff at the Cryonics Institute for several years. We were so fortunate to have him. When the Soviet Union broke up, he was looking for a place to do his research. And basically we said, do whatever you want. We'd like it to be sort of within these parameters, but just do basic research on freezing. And he did, and he came up with VM1, which is the cryoprotectant that we use today, the vitrification solution that we use today.
Another Bob in the front.
Yes, sir.
Ever resuscitated anyone to this point? And number two, have you looked into some sort of insurance for insuring the installation of someone into the cryogenics?
Reviving people, no. We have not yet revived anyone. There has been, I believe, a dog was revived once. There were these animals that I talked about earlier that have been revived. We haven't revived people, and the truth is, we don't know 100% sure that we will be able to. We don't know 100% sure that I'm going to walk off this stage in 10 minutes. There's nothing that's absolute. We think it extremely likely that down the road we will be able to, and probably those patients who are frozen more recently will be revived first because the freezing process is getting better and better. There's less and less damage to the patient as we develop better techniques. And so probably that's the way it's going to be. But we haven't yet, and we won't until we are very confident that it will work. Similar to heart transplants. They did a lot of heart transplants on animals before they did them on human beings. You don't just start saying, hey, let's give it a shot. We're not going to do that. Your second question was insurance for funding cryonic suspension? And yes, that is done. That is done fairly commonly. It used to be very easy to put the Cryonics Institute or Alcor down or some other organization down as the beneficiary on your insurance policy. Today, insurance companies have made that a little bit more difficult. However, you can always change the beneficiary on a policy. So even if initially you have to make the beneficiary a relative or your estate or what have you, 2 minutes later, you're allowed to change it to anything. There are no requirements at all. And so yes, we have many people that fund via insurance. It's especially good for young people. It's very inexpensive. I have an insurance policy myself. I pay, I think it's $100 a year for my insurance policy that I started many years ago. And that provides far more than the $28,000 that CI asks for. I want to give them more than what they ask for. Those of us that can try to, and those of us that can't, don't. But yes, that's actually, I work in that field. I actually just signed contracts for 2 people the other day in my day job and helped them to get insurance for that very purpose. And there's another gentleman who does that as well. Rudy Hoffman has been doing this also. He and I both have been doing this for years.
Specifically designed to be interned.
Specifically designed for cryonics.
Joe,
Yes, sir.
we have a film film clip we're going to show in just a moment. And before I do, I just wanted to let you know that you're sharing the stage with Martine Rothblatt was here just a little over a year ago. And she was famously quoted as saying, the cost of cryonics is about the same as the cost of a cup of coffee a day. And of course, it depends on whether you start when you're young with your insurance or
Very true.
you jump into it when you're older. But it is. And Douglas, I think I'd like to key that up. This will help. We have a number of people here tonight that are new to the concept of cryonics. So we'd like to show this video. I believe it's the Larry King video that we showed a year or so ago. Go ahead, Douglas.
What's with the freezer? You want to chop your head off and put it in the freezer? What's that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
What's this business?
Cryonics.
Yeah.
We share the same desire for life longer than we are.
Immortality is
yes,
what we want.
yes.
Okay, all right. Now, you can either believe there's something up there,
Right.
or believe there's nothing, or hope for something, or be frozen.
Yeah.
How about we get a frozen together?
Let's
Take
do it.
sure whatever we
Let's
have,
do it, man.
and we wake up
Does
together.
it have to be at the same time?
So
Was that Donny Osmond?
it should have been
What's
done.
with the
Oh,
Seth MacFarlane. Yeah. So
me
and
look
also
familiar.
wanted to point out that in in March, we have Catherine Baldwin from Suspended Animation. She'll be here at Perpetual Life. There was another question here. Did you have a question?
Questions?
Right. What was the total cost for everything?
The total cost for cryonic suspension? It depends on the organization that you use. Each organization is different. At the Cryonics, I can only speak for the Cryonics Institute. $28,000 is the total cost. Has not changed since we opened in 1976. There are people who can give more due, but $28,000 is the cost. That does not include suspended animation. If you want to hire them to work on you before you die or to be prepared before you die, or you can prepare in some other way. But as far as the suspension itself, that's what it is, $28,000. No, Suspended Animation is an organization that can help people prior and at death, actually, help prepare them for going into the cryonic suspension.
To elucidate, Suspended Animation has a machine, a vehicle that's similar to an ambulance that would come to you upon your legal death to start the cryonic process. And just want to say that the Church of Perpetual Life does not endorse any particular company or brand, but I certainly appreciate my good friend Joe for being here. Have a question over here.
And I should say that too. Cryonics Institute does not endorse or say anything negative about, for that matter, Suspended Animation. We have many members that use them and many members that don't. It's up to the members.
Does the Church of Perpetual Life believe that we are our body and that when we go we're still there? So that you kind of go to sleep and then sometime they bring you out? Because my belief and all of the research and everything I've done is that this is just a vessel and I'm really not in here, I'm all around here.
So Joe can't really speak to the Church of Perpetual Life. He's a guest speaker this evening. But that would be a very good question for me to answer for you. And I'll be happy to do that downstairs as the evening progresses. So that's something I'd be happy to do. Sure. Zizi, let me get over there. And we have time for 2 more questions. And, okay, Zizi.
Thank you.
What's the average age of the people who are your patients?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I should know that answer. Thank you. You keep me on my toes. I don't know the answer. I can tell you that the oldest patient that I know of was, I believe, 96 years old. And the youngest that I know of, I believe, was 22. But I don't know what the average is. I'm sorry. I would imagine it's closer to the 60s and 70s range than to the 20s range.
There's one more question over here. Excuse me.
Can you tell us at all about any research that's being done to prepare the body to come back into society emotionally and mentally?
That is also a really good question. A lot of really good questions tonight. I like that. One of the things that Neil and I spoke about was the idea of this church being a family. And I find that very interesting. And that's exactly how we think of the Cryonics Institute as well. That it is a family and that our job is to reintegrate people into society. We don't know how that's going to be done because we don't know what year it's going to be. We don't know what society is going to be like. But what we know is that we are all dedicated to preparing people in that fashion. And we have an endowment set aside to pay the appropriate people, be they sociologists or psychologists or whatever we might need, to help to reintegrate people into society. And actually, there's one of the things I'm going to say in my closing sort of addresses that. So, did you say that was the last question, or I see one more?
Sure.
Too much?
I appreciate that. What we can do is you'll be able to speak with Joe personally downstairs and ask him. Thank you.
So, I just wanted to mention a couple of questions that I've been asked, and maybe some of you have been asked as well. And some of these are somewhat related to the things that you've said. So here's one of the questions, and this is kind of related to what you were just asking me. Would someone want to come back to a world in which they know no one, the technology is like magic, the language is different? Get that question all the time. I have a one-word answer for it. Baby. That's what a baby comes into. They don't know the language. They don't know the technology. They don't know anybody. They don't know anything. All right, so you say, yeah, but babies really don't know anything, so that you can start from scratch with them. Adults, it's a little more difficult. So I have another answer to that. My grandmother. My grandmother was sent to the United States when she was 14 years old. She had one half-brother here in the United States. That's the only person she knew. She didn't know the language. She came from a little place in Europe, a town in Europe where they had no indoor plumbing, no electricity, no telephones. The technology here was like magic. And the rest of her family and friends were killed in the Holocaust. She led a happy and productive life, healthy life. Would anyone think of saying to her, wouldn't you have rather died with everyone else you knew? But that's what people say to cryonicsts. Of course, we're devastated when we lose those that we love. And I don't want to make little of that. And I hope and pray that as cryonics becomes more prevalent and more accepted, more people will be around that we know when we are revived. So we might not need as much integration as we were talking about. Another question, there will be too many people. People have been saying this for as long as there were people, I think. Long before cryonics. There's still more room on Earth. There's still, a lot of people having babies without much thought to that. There are other planets. There are Dyson spheres. There are a lot of ways that we can deal with this. There won't be any new ideas. People will become staid and stagnant. Well, wisdom comes with age. And so we also might have a lot more wise people if they live much longer. But at the same time, if we keep our bodies young, maybe we'll be more vibrant in our minds, in our ideas, in our excitement about life, in our thoughts, in our development. Hard to say. Plus, there still probably will be children. No one's saying don't have children. So the two are not antithetical. What if God doesn't want us to succeed? Well, then we won't. But I think that if there is a God, he gave us these brains and curiosity and tools for a reason. And it would be blasphemous and heretical not to use them. He also gave us ethics and morals, most of us, and we must be diligent in that area too. And I can't emphasize that enough. Have you had any exciting cases? Yes. I was a lawyer for over a decade. I mentioned I'm now a recovering lawyer. And I once stopped a cremation within 20 minutes of when it was about to occur. And that person is now cryopreserved at the Cryonics Institute. For those who haven't fallen asleep yet, I apologize, I'm going to repeat myself briefly. We are ignorant. We do not know when somebody is truly dead, when someone's heart stops, when disease damages the body beyond what we can now repair, when illness overtakes our medical skills, a person lies silently on the bed. That person may be screaming in silence, "I'm not dead yet." And freezing organs to make organ transplants safer, less costly, and more available, everyone is in favor of that today. We need to encourage further development of this that is already happening. There is an urgent need for organ transplants. In fact, we can forget about cryonics entirely and just work on organ transplants. Society's in favor of it, and it's a laudable venture. And truly, I don't think that we will have successful cryonic suspension until we have mastered the freezing and revival of individual organs. About a year and a half ago, I had the honor of a private meeting with Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock from Star Trek. He was a special man, a truly special man, who at the end of the meeting not only donated to the Cryo Prize, but also said that I could tell people that he had donated. So I guess it's appropriate that I end this talk by quoting from Star Trek. In the episode Mirror, Mirror, several members of the Enterprise crew find themselves in an alternate and barbaric universe. As they are about to return to their own universe, Captain Kirk tries to convince the Mr. Spock of the alternate universe that he can and should work to change that society. Alternate Mr. Spock says, "One man cannot summon the future." To which Captain Kirk responds, "But one man can change the present. And I say to you, be that person." Thank you. Thanks, Neil.
Excellent, passionate, great talk, Joe. Thank you for coming and departing your wisdom with us here this evening. I'd like to now bring up a gentleman who is the founder of this church, the Church of Perpetual Life. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Bill Falloon.
I just wanted to put a perspective on what Joe talked about, that maybe he wouldn't be able to talk as much as I'm able to. I've been an advocate, a passionate advocate of cryopreservation since 1977. I set up a small cryopreservation facility in Pompano Beach back then, got on all the local radio shows, got on some national TV shows. So when people needed to have the cryopreservation process implemented, they'd often reach out to me and ask me, where do I call? This is like prior to the internet. And I'd give them a list of options, a list of prices. And often they couldn't afford to pay a lot of money, so that the $28,000 that the Cryonics Institute is able to provide this service for was incredible. It enabled them to have their loved one cryopreserved. And so many of them would call me up afterwards and thank me and express the gratitude for being able to find an affordable cryonic service provider, and also the fact that they had a sense of comfort that the person that they cared so much for, they didn't fear that they were permanently dead, that there was some chance of revival in the future. And I've gotten enough of those calls to say it's worth repeating about it tonight at this service, that people really do appreciate it beyond just the idea of that person being cryopreserved. It's the family members who have a little bit of peace of mind, or in some cases a lot of peace of mind, that their loved one someday may be restored to life. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, just briefly, is what I saw on the news last week. Maybe a few of you saw it, but it really jumped out at me. For the first time in the history of commercialization. And when you see ads for automobiles, they're always uplifting. They make it appear like you're going to drive that car right into the future life and be happy forever. But Volvo, the automobile company, they ran an advertising campaign, or a PR campaign of sorts, and the media picked up on it. And they used a term that I've never heard before as it relates to commercialization. By year 2020, Volvo is committing to build a death-proof automobile. That's unprecedented. The idea that you would take something like death and put it in the context of an automobile, because when you're trying to sell a car, that's the last thing you want people to think about. But yet, the way people are thinking nowadays, they are looking at car safety. Car safety ratings are factors as to why people buy them. And to put this into context, in the 1960s, about 57,000 Americans died every single year in automobile crashes. 57,000. There are 3 times more cars on the road today compared to the 1960s, and the death rate is around 30,000 a year. Now, if you take that 3-time figure based on the 1960s data, you'd be looking at maybe 170,000 people dying every year in this country from auto wrecks. But what's happened is the cars have gotten a lot safer. The co-founder of this Church of Perpetual Life, Mr. Saul Kent, was involved in a very significant auto accident 4 years ago. The car was totaled. 100% totaled. It was a brand new car too, by the way. It wasn't just such an old car that they totaled it. But he walked out of that car unscratched. The airbags deployed, the crumble zones worked. He had no problems whatsoever. The car totally destroyed. So he's alive right now because of that technology. And we're seeing it every day, but not always appreciating the fact that technology is saving lives in the medical arena, and it's saving lives as it relates to automobiles. So again, that word death proof, first time ever that I've seen it used in commercial history, and I think it's going to become more and more popular as businesses realize people don't want to die, and they'll pay more. They'll use their brand if it's perceived as being safer. So that's what I want to talk about tonight, succinctly, and I will be downstairs to talk to everyone as long as people want to stay. What we're going to do, though, after this, and you're welcome to go downstairs and have a nice dinner, interact, but we're going to tape a TV show that's going to be broadcast nationwide. It'll also be broadcast on the ABC affiliate in Palm Beach County on noon on Sunday. I don't know exactly which Sunday it'll be broadcast on, but what we're going to talk about is religion and cryonics. And Joe is going to talk about the idea of being an Orthodox Jew and how you then can transition that into cryonics without really violating any religious principle. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that if my mother adhered to her religious principles, I would have never survived more than a couple weeks. I needed a blood transfusion when I was born. And her particular religion, they were against it. They said, let the baby die. You're violating the religion if you allow that blood transfusion. Fortunately, my mother says, well, I'll change religions. Just go from one faith to another. I got the blood transfusion, and I'm still here. So sometimes you just have to be a little creative to accomplish your religious objectives and still remain alive. So I want to thank everyone for showing up. Again, you're welcome to watch the taping or go downstairs. We're going to be here late tonight, as always, so you're welcome to do whichever you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Excellent. And before we depart, I would just like to let you know that there is the Revolution Against Aging and Death Festival, the RAD Festival, and there's a few days left to sign up for that so that you can take advantage of the lower price. If you're interested in signing up for the RAD Festival or finding out more about it, it's in San Diego, August 4th through the 7th, and we have some mini computers or iPads downstairs where we can help you to get signed in to that festival. I'm going, and I know Bill's going. I know a number of other people are going to be there. So Richard will probably be there, I guess. And I don't know if you're going, Joe, but it's something I'll tell you all about. I don't know if we've talked much about this. Also want to let you remind you that is that on the fourth Thursday of next month we have Maria Entriguez Abramson, the wonderful songstress, composer, actress, and she'll be here next month. And again, this evening at 9:30 we have the Peace Education Program right here. Another installment of the Peace Education Program. Is Larry here? And Larry is here. Larry, our host, Larry Lusbader, will be up here at 9:30, up here in this room to do that. So thank you for coming. And as Bill mentioned, we have some great food downstairs. We have some wonderful food that's been prepared for you. I hope you'll be able to join us at the reception downstairs.